This podcast is brought to you by Consolidation Coach, the leading M&A consulting firm in the collision repair industry.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl with another episode of Consolidation Nation, sponsored by Consolidation Coach. And we have Laura Gay on as a guest again. She is the CEO and president and founder and owner and all the above of Consolidation Coach. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Jason. Excited to be here once again for our monthly podcast.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk to you again. So this is episode 4. And episode 1, we kind of gave a broad overview of the consolidation landscape in 2025. Episode 2, we warned our listeners and watchers, viewers, on wolves in sheep's clothing and what to look out for. Episode 3, we did a deep dive into the financials of a body shop. And in this episode, we are going to get into the mind of a buyer. The buyers out there, the buyers who want to buy auto body shops, what do they look like? What do they dress like? What do they smell like? What do they have for breakfast? What's on their agenda for the day? We're going to do a personality dissect, if you will, on these buyers, right?
We are, and they're not wearing Armani, or maybe they are, but when they come visit you, they're not for sure.
So Laura, why don't we start with a broad overview of the buyer or buyers out there. Describe them to me and what they're after.
I think if you think about buyers as a whole, kind of think of it as an onion, the outside layer. I think they all kind of check these few boxes. They're all seeking shops that are 10,000 square foot or bigger. They like shops that are DRP centric. They like shops that have OEM certifications, but that's not a deal killer. They like shops where there's a manager in place rather than the owner is running the store. And that's the high level things that they're looking for. And when you talk about personalities, that's where, we kind of go down different roads, and your shop may not be paved to go down one particular consolidator road where maybe it's paved for 2 different ones or vice versa. So I think it's important to understand the different consolidators that are out there, what their personalities are, and where, your shop fits. And that's part of what we do at Consolidation Coach is, amongst many things, is we try to figure out, the shop owner, the shop's personality that is selling, and who best where do they plug in? And usually wherever they plug in is typically where the best deal is. Typically, it's like anything, if you're really into Mustangs, for example, and there's a Corvette for sale, then, you're probably not going to buy it, even if it's cheap. But likewise, if you're really into Corvettes and a really nice one comes along and it's exactly what you want, you're going to step up and buy it. It's the same premise, just in the body shop world.
So something you said, Laura, made me think about this, and maybe it's not true, but do these different buyers have deeper pockets than others? Do some have more of access to more money than others? And does that make their personality different and maybe more appealing to a shop that maybe would get a better offer?
So I think it's probably that they're more nimble than others. And yeah, some of them do have bigger checkbooks than others. And yeah, sometimes that can drive the sale price. But honestly, the biggest things that drives the sale price are the consolidators in your market actively working, like they're trying to grow that market? Are the type of shop that you have, are you what they're seeking? I mean, that's the 2 biggest things that drive it. And then ultimately, sales and your attributes. And most importantly, your adjusted EBITDA. Those are really the things that drive the sales and the higher deals, the bigger deals.
So you talked about, the commonalities between these buyers. They're all looking for 10,000 square feet. They're looking for DRP centric or DRP friendly. Give me an example of a group that maybe is looking for something a little different that others are not looking for.
So I think a really good example of that is Quality Collision Group. Jared Guerin is the CEO, and he's done an amazing job creating a very unique model. And Vive, they also have a very unique model as well. Not the same, similar, but very unique in the regard that they're very interested in obtaining shops that are highly certified with OEM certifications, specifically not the ones that you can buy, but the ones that you have to earn, like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Jag, Rover, those types of certifications. And they run a very different model where they're very focused on a high quality repair. In some markets, I know they're testing doing a balanced bill model, and they're just really running their operation quite differently. The leadership they have is definitely on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, it's 100. They've really gotten a stable of amazing talent from the collision space and they're just doing amazing things. And a lot of people say, oh, it's not sustainable, but they're doing it and they're rocking and they're killing it. So again, it's like anything, it's whether you want Chick-fil-A, you want Burger King, you want McDonald's. And I'm not saying that that's what they are, I'm not comparing them to fast food, but really any type of chain. You think about, whether you're going to Home Depot, Lowe's, or whether you're going, to Macy's or you're going to Dillard's, you know what I mean? They all have their personality and it's the same thing, just in the collision space, if you will.
You mentioned, Laura, the biggest thing for a shop is to determine if the consolidators are active in their market right now. Is the time right? And so how does a shop find that out reliably? I mean, clearly they might be a part of an association and hear it through the grapevine, or they just have networks of friends who own other body shops and they hear from them. Or is there a more reliable method of knowing truly if your market is hot right now and there's a lot of consolidators who want to expand in that market?
Yeah, good question. It's really hard for an independent shop owner to try to navigate it and figure it out on their own. I spend hours and hours and hours talking to these consolidators all the time, every day. I go to SEMA every year in the MSO symposium and, get a good handle on what, growth strategy is for the subsequent year and markets and things like that. So, all this information's floating around in my brain because this is what I do every day. It's no different than a shop, that is Tesla certified and they've put, a bazillion unicides, on a Model 3. They can do it in their sleep. It's the same thing. It's just, it's what I do. It's what I know, and trying to figure it out and navigate it on your own is challenging. So, I would say, you could certainly give me a call. There's other people out there that do what I do. So, this is more of it's not an infomercial. This is more a educational podcast that we're just trying to help shop owners not get the short end of the stick. When they get to a position that they're thinking about selling, I just want everybody to be educated. And if somebody decides to call and they need guidance, we're here.
I think that echoes something you had said in a previous podcast, and that was a big mistake shops make is not dipping their toe in the water before jumping in the pool, right? That kind of is kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you can dip your toe in the water too many different places, and then you get a reputation, for, somebody that's kind of, not going to act, you know what I mean? Just, wasting time, if you will. And that's not good either, and it's one of the things that's really hard as a shop owner, especially if you're involved in daily operations, and especially if you're actually running the shop every day, to try to sell your shop on your own, because it takes on a life of its own. I mean, it's full time. I have 8 people that work with my team, including myself, and we all work 50 to 70 hours a week. I mean, it's a lot. It's very labor intensive and mentally draining, and owning and managing a shop is mentally draining. So trying to do both of them, honestly, is next to impossible. And I did it myself 10 years ago. And the selling process then to now is so much more sophisticated. It's the consolidators have become, smarter about what they're doing. They've, just like, over the years, we as shops have developed, blueprinting repairs. Well, consolidators have, process improved and blueprinted their process as well. So, it's one of those things that you really have to come prepared.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned, I did not know this, that a seller can gain a bad reputation in this market by crying wolf too many times. Or maybe it's
Yep.
just indecision on their part, or maybe they're trying to get the best deal and play one person off another. That's interesting that it could get to a point with a seller that the consolidators are hands off and say, okay, we're not dealing with this person because they're non-committal.
Yeah, it's happened a lot. I've seen it play out. And I tell you, it's really comes down to shop owners just being uncertain. You get one chance to sell your shop. You can't make any mistakes. And when you go into it and you've never done it before, it would be like for me, I've never ridden a horse. I don't know anything about riding a horse. Tori, that works for me, my director of operations, she rides horses all the time. I'm petrified of them. I go and watch her and I'm amazed, but I don't want to ride a horse. It scares me. It's kind of the same thing. If you've just never done it, it's very overwhelming. And then when they start talking all of this, what I'm going to call jargon and such, it can be just very overwhelming. And instead of doing something, you kind of turn into an ostrich, stick your head in the sand and do nothing. And, honestly, sometimes, some scenarios that can be worse.
So Laura, we're 4 months, almost 5 months into 2025. Has your view on the landscape of consolidation in 2025 changed at all since January? And we know with this consolidation dynamic going on, it can change, turn on a pivot on a dime. Tell me if the outlook that you have is the same as when we talked in January.
I think it's still as aggressive as it was in January. I just think things have shifted some. And when I say shifted, I mean that consolidators, 2 years ago were, buying, 2-day-old bread and paying, fresh bread money, Now you can't sell 2-day-old bread shops, deals that I did 2 years ago would never fly. The duck would never quack in today's market. So they're definitely becoming more discerning. Financial due diligence is definitely becoming more just deeper, a lot more questions, more intense. I guess that would be the proper way of describing that. And I think about my days now, versus a year ago. And if it took me an hour a year ago to do something, it takes me 3 to 4 hours now. Just everything is a lot more difficult than it was a year ago, just getting things to the finish line. And I just think it comes back to buyers being more discerning. We've had a lot of deals fall apart recently over things that they would have never fallen apart on a year ago or 2 years ago. And I just think, again, it goes back to consolidators, becoming more efficient, better at blueprinting, better at understanding, tripping over their own mistakes and learning from them. And I think it just goes across the board with all of them. Every single acquisition they make, every single integration, every single whip walk, every single post-sale reconciliation, every wire they do, every flow of funds, every financial due diligence, every environmental that they do, every building inspection, every equipment inspection, every time, and I'm like only touching on a few things here, they just get better and better every time they do it. You know what I mean? And I just think that it's going to continue probably down that trail, especially with money. It's no secret, that there's been some market adjustments and interest rates and some flux in that area. And consequently, this is all private equity money for the better part. And ultimately, they're watching, they're doing this too. They're watching and seeing what's going on too. But private equity, one thing about them, if they're not growing, they're dying. So, even back a couple years ago when they were, paying, 11, 12, 13% interest rate on money, which a lot of them still are, they're still buying, they're still growing. So I don't think it's going to stop, anytime soon. But I do think there's definitely a market shift for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you said, Laura, you used to be able to sell 2-day-old bread. You can't do that anymore. Maybe that speaks to strike while the iron's hot. If you're a body shop, be decisive, right? because you may miss something good in the market. Um, you mentioned the economic turmoil and things going on in the market in Wall Street and whatnot, and we got to talk about tariffs. And I think I asked you recently, just briefly, if tariffs were going to, in any way, stop the consolidation train or alter it in any way. And I think you had said at the time that you didn't think so. Could you elaborate on that more?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kind of torn. Sometimes I think it's going to, and then sometimes I don't. And I think it's just one of those things that, we're just going to have to watch it play out. But the biggest reason I don't think it's going to affect it is people are still going to wreck cars. That's not going to stop. You know what I mean? It's not going to stop. And if anything, sales are going to rise because parts are going to be higher. It seems like to me, it's going to be a win, But then if you think about the potential for not being able to get parts and having parts issues like we had before, and then not being able to get sales across the curb, they could be a problem. So I think it's something we really need to keep our eyes on and really watch. But again, consolidators, if they're not growing, they're dying. So that's their MO, that's their motto. And, I don't think, just like high interest rates and such didn't slow them down, I don't know that this is going to do it either. And still, from the last time that we met and recorded our podcast, the amount of buyers that are entering the market buying, creating regional MSOs to national MSOs, it's insane. It's crazy. I field easily 1 to 2 calls weekly from people wanting to enter the market, wanting to do this, or have already started it, So it's really amazing how this is all playing out, to be honest.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think it speaks to the strength and longevity of this consolidation trend, this consolidation train going on. You mentioned Vive, you mentioned quality as far as buyers that may stand out a little different than others. Is there another example you can give me of a buyer that may be just a little bit different than your standard one, looking for something different?
Well, I would say, Gerber, not that they're really looking for something different, but I think their strategy has changed. For a long time, Gerber has been a conservative buyer, and they're not anymore. They've got all new leadership who's ready to hit the ground running, and they want to grow, grow, grow. So I would expect from Gerber, and they've got strategic markets that they're focused on for 2025, and they want to buy a lot of shops. So I think that they've evolved. They're changing their method of operation. They've got some great people in place in their mergers and acquisitions department that are swift and do a great job. So I think that's probably a unique change over what we've been seeing over the subsequent years. And, when you think about like Classic Collision, I mean, they're just as aggressive. They're buying a lot of large multi-shop owners in different markets. And they are growing like crazy. So I just think that, they've all got different MOs. Some of them are massive growth. Some of them are, growth through certifications and being a higher level service. They've all got their niche,
Yeah, you got me thinking too, Laura, talking about the rest of the year. I was thinking that collision is a seasonal business, as we know. Is consolidation seasonal? We're in spring now. Is it going to heat up both literally and figuratively this summer? Is it going to cool down in the winter, or is there going to be a last minute push at the end of 2025 to buy? Is consolidation, does it follow the seasons?
It definitely is seasonal to a degree. And I think the seasons drive off of, when the consolidators are buying and when they're planning or plotting, if you will. So typically, once, SEMA time hits, and the MSO symposium, kind of from that point on until the 1st of January, it's planning and plotting season. And then, as soon as January hits, then, it's wide open, ready to, start hitting the ground running. This year and last year, the ground didn't get running quite as quickly as it had in subsequent years, but we certainly made it up last year because it was absolutely insane from April to December of last year. And that's pretty much where we are right now, mid-March to right now. I mean, it's been absolutely insane. We are working crazy hours and it's insane. So I do believe it is, definitely a consolidation season, if you will.
Well, that's great, Laura. Thank you so much. This has been great information. I think we've adequately profiled the buyer and buyers in this market, and I think we've touched on things we haven't touched on in prior episodes of Consolidation Nation. And I just want to say this is really exciting. The next 3 episodes of Consolidation Nation are going to be shot live here at Babcock's World Headquarters with the Consolidation Coach team. So this is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to having you and your team in our office to shoot these podcasts.
Well, we are super excited. We've been plotting our trip to Cleveland, and Chad Smith, my right hand, and Russell Winston, my left hand, along with myself, we'll be flying in, and we're super excited to get recording with you.
And I am too. This is going to be wonderful. You get to see our beautiful studio here, the Cleveland, Akron area. Hopefully we get some good weather for you. I think it's going to get into the 70s next week, I think. But knowing this area, it could be the 70 degrees one day and 30 the next. So we'll see.
I'm going to bring the heat with me from Florida.
We would love that, trust me. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jason.